Well, Texas Tech is the Big 12 champion in 2025, and this game gave us some real clarity. Okay, BYU is not going to make the playoff, unfortunately. We can debate that. We can discuss that. They're not going to be in. Texas Tech will get a playoff bye. We can debate that with some folks. It seemed like earlier today still wanted to debate that a little bit. I think it's going to happen, and Texas Tech wins the league. That's pretty clear after a 34-7 Big 12 championship win for the Red Raiders. Congratulations to all of my Texas Tech fans out there who are watching this. It was another really impressive game, and frankly, it felt very much like the first game that these two teams played against each other. Welcome into Open for Business, the best Big 12 podcast on planet Earth. I am your host, John Kurtz. Thank you for joining me. As you can see, I am live from AT&T Stadium in Arlington, okay, which has been a tremendous host today. It's been a long time since I've been here for an event as a media member. I was here 3 years ago for the Big 12 championship game. I guess I've been here before for Big 12 media events, like Big 12 media days within the last couple of years. But the last game that I covered here as a professional media member, I think was the 2011 Cotton Bowl between K-State and Arkansas. So it had been a minute, and I'm glad to be back. And man, Texas Tech fans who filled up this building were treated to a real good day. Texas Tech, I would say, had about, I said at least 70-30, probably more like 80-20, 85-15, something like that. The fan split here today. Tech fans showed up. They were loud. I'll get to more of that. Let me tell you first, as you file in, I'm sure there will be a big audience for this one. Make sure that you like the video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Appreciate everybody who does that. Subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter at ofbnews.com. Over 5,600 Big 12 fan subscribers to that right now as well. It is totally free. Comes to your inbox twice a week. I appreciate immensely everybody for doing that. Look, Tech fans, get in there. This is your day. You guys know if you click the $ below the chat box, it submits a super chat. That'll guarantee that you get on, but have fun in the chat. Live it up, Red Raider fans. It's been a long time coming for you guys, and you've earned this, and I understand that. I've seen some of the Twitter sentiment out there from Texas Tech fans. I mean, Gambling Gauchos, Rob Bro, guys, Ryan Hyatt, my Texas Tech media buddies out there. I'm super excited for that they got to experience this today. Unfortunately, might not be the best thing in the world for the Big 12 if the Big 12 is only going to get one team in the playoff, but it does stand to reason that if the Big 12 is getting one in, it's going to be better if you have a bye if you are Texas Tech. So that seems to be what's happening after this. Guys, to be honest with you, my feelings about this game really just about start and end with it felt so much like the first game that these teams played against each other. So much so. If you start going down the stat sheet, I mean, BYU couldn't run the ball the first time around in Lubbock. They really couldn't run the ball outside of one drive here today. They had 2.7 yards per carry in the first matchup. It was actually worse, 2.1 yards per carry in this matchup today. BYU had one drive the entire game. It came at the end of the game in Lubbock, and it came at the very beginning of the game here in this one. And we can talk about Bear Bachmeier and how healthy he was and how that may have affected things, because I certainly think that it did. But man, once you got past that first drive, BYU was just kind of out of tricks offensively and still could not muster any sort of a downfield passing game. And I think as you move into next year, downfield passing game is where you need to start thinking about trying to improve this roster quite a bit. Bear Bachmeier is going to need better weapons to be able to push the ball down the field so that when he gets hurt and his run game and mobility is limited, you're not as limited as an offense as you were after that. So, but really, if you think about it, Texas Tech crushed BYU in the turnover battle. It was 4-0 today. Just came apart at the seams in the second half. 4-0 today, 3-0 in the first matchup. Held BYU to under 3 yards rushing. And then Tech could have won by 30, but didn't finish drives. They kicked 6 field goals today. They kicked 5 in the first matchup in Lubbock. So, really almost a carbon copy of the same game that we saw if you just flip-flop BYU's one big drive from beginning of game to end of game. And that did make this feel like a bit of a closer game for a while, whereas last time around, it's just a last gasp touchdown for BYU. This time it felt like, okay, they're hanging around. They're hanging around, but late in the third quarter just got whitewashed. And that's really what Texas Tech is. You know, I was annoyed. I saw Danny Cannell early in the game tweet like, oh, neither of these teams are as good as Notre Dame or Miami. And I'm just like rolling my eyes big time at that, but especially the Texas Tech part of it, because this is what Texas Tech does. Like, I think people look at it and think, oh, well, this offense isn't dominant, so this team can't be dominant. And it's like, no, the Texas Tech defense is inevitable. The Texas Tech defense is absolutely inevitable, and they just wear you down. They smother you, and they're going to make enough plays by the end of the game that you look up at the scoreboard and you're like, man, BYU got dominated. And that's what happened today. I use this analogy all the time. You guys are probably sick of me talking about it, but shout out to my guys on the Solid Verbal. Those guys at the Solid Verbal always talk about a crock potting as opposed to like flash frying something. Crock potting, you sit there and you let it cook. You let it cook, you let it cook, you let it cook. And you let this Texas Tech defense sink its teeth into you. Just let it cook throughout a game. Eventually, you are just totally fried by the end of it. And that's what happened to BYU and the BYU offense, to the point that, you know, by the end of the game, you just get basically kind of a mercy punt from BYU. And it erupted. This was maybe a little bit different where, you know, BYU had a couple of jabs early on, and then it's just an avalanche at the end of the game when the turnovers started happening. But that's what Tech does, because Tech is good enough that if they can force you out of your game plan and you have to start trying to push the ball down the field at all costs and only do that, their pass rush will eat you up, or Ben Roberts will eat you up, which is what happened today. Ben Roberts had 2 interceptions, halfway close to a third one, and a ball that he knocked down. That guy was insane. You know, I mean, I heard Kalani Sitake talking in the postgame press conference about just how good Ben Roberts was. He was like, dude, he's just making one-hand interceptions. Like, what do you want us to do? And that's totally fair. I think that's a pretty fair response from Sitake there. Like, what do you want us to do when that's what happens when we do try to push the ball down the field? So, yeah, I mean, it reminded me, like, I was at the K-State Texas Tech game earlier this year, and K-State for like 3 quarters hung with Texas Tech. They were playing a pretty good game. They had some opportunities to really hang around, probably could have had even more game control for a little while. But then at the end of the game, Tech finally gets them down by a couple scores, and that's when it can just be an avalanche. Like, Texas Tech's defense will just keep them going. Even if the offense is having to kick field goals, if they're allowing Joey McGuire to make very weird decisions on 4th down when you should be going up 16-7 instead of, you know, same story as the first matchup, right? There's one of those from Joey McGuire, and maybe they should have had pass interference in the end zone, but they don't get that call. Despite all that, the defense will just keep getting stops. And then finally, the offense does enough, and it's like a 2-score game, and it's late enough that the other team just has to say, we'll drop back and pass it. And the exact same thing happened to K-State. Avery Johnson starts dropping back all the time. Boom, there's a strip sack that gets run in for a touchdown. And then the game looks like a blowout by the end of it. Like, that is Texas Tech's style. So it's really annoying to hear someone be like, you know, hey, this team is not as good as Notre Dame or Miami just because the offense hasn't erupted early. It's like, no, this is a part of what Texas Tech is. I mean, I feel like, obviously, I'm not trying to compare them to like Nick Saban, Alabama, but I feel like some of this is how like Nick Saban, Alabama teams won for a while, right? They would just wear you down with the defense, and then late in the game, things would come unhinged. Looks like a blowout by the end of the game. So I don't know if I would go quite as far as Kalani Sitake, who after the game, BYU's head coach said Texas Tech is the number 1 team in the country. I wish people would start talking about them like that. I certainly understand why he would say that now, having played them twice and having the same game play out in front of him twice. But I think Texas Tech has clearly proven it's a top 4 team in the country. Baron Morton had some nicer moments today where he was slinging the ball at times. There was some inconsistency, had a really bad miss on a 3rd down that I'm thinking of in particular, but really nice ball to Coy Aiken. He let Coy Aiken take care of a lot of the playmaking today, as well as like Jacoby Williams. And then they kind of just use Cameron Dickey as like a sledgehammer throughout the game. He's like throwing jabs. Jacoby Williams, Coy Aiken today were more of like the haymakers. So that was a really nice combination, I thought, offensively, of things that Texas Tech put together today. But just solid. But then again, finished drives. And that's if we want to talk about like warts that you could see showing up for Texas Tech in a playoff game, I think it's not being able to finish, relying on kicking too many field goals, and then will Joey McGuire make a critical game management mistake, which we've seen a couple of times now this year in these games, which it doesn't matter when you can overwhelm the opponent. But once, Tech's looking at a bye, right? So your first game is probably going to be against a team like Oregon. And I don't think Tech is going to be good enough to just overwhelm Oregon. I certainly think they can win the game, but it's probably going to be a tight game. And some of these things are going to matter more. And, that's a whole other storyline as well for Texas Tech. Like, you just haven't played that many close games. So what happens when you finally are fighting for your life in a playoff game and you're playing a close game? That will be something to monitor. But, frankly, today's not really the day for that. Like, Texas Tech needs to celebrate. Texas Tech needs to live it up. They have certainly earned it, and they deserve it for the way that they played today. Some crazy stats. Texas Tech gave up a 14-play, 90-yard drive on BYU's initial drive for a touchdown. And then the rest of the game gave up 110 yards. That's crazy, man. So 59 plays. So that'd be some quick math here. 45 plays. 45 plays, 110 yards after BYU's opening drive for the Texas Tech defense. That's a crazy good effort from the Red Raiders. They forced 4 turnovers. Ben Roberts stole the show from Jacob Rodriguez. One of my few laments from this game is I was sitting there thinking, like, man, had Jacob Rodriguez had the game that Ben Roberts had today with a couple interceptions and one crazy one-handed interception, like, he legitimately might have jumped into having a shot at being a Heisman finalist. Like, it would have helped him a lot, his Heisman campaign a lot, had he had that sort of game. But look, Texas Tech fans, I know you don't really care. You want the win. You don't care who's actually getting it done for you defensively. And today that guy was Ben Roberts. If you're looking at the BYU side of this, just like the first game, there were some missed opportunities. Obviously, the turnovers were bad. Bear Bachmeier's injury is a factor. Clearly in the first half, it really affected him after the first drive. The first drive was such a breath of fresh air based on what I think the expectation was from everybody for BYU against this Tech defense. And then Bear was not very mobile. He was you could watch him from up here just between plays and stuff. I'm not sure exactly how much was on the TV broadcast. I was popping in and out of watching that on my laptop, but he was just walking gingerly all the time. Even when he was handing the ball off, you were seeing a lot of that. It seemed like it really forced Aaron Roderick to maybe go into a shell a bit offensively and not try to be as aggressive. And I think at least if you can be more aggressive when it's not just an obvious situation where you have to be aggressive at the end of the game, there's a better chance of success. There were some tight window throws, like on the first drive, Bear Bachmeier, I thought the pass that he hooked up with Chase Roberts deep down the field, it was a pretty tight window that he put the ball into. Really, it was just a creative offensive series, the way that BYU was moving the ball more than anything. But there was at least one or two where I said, all right, that's a really nice throw, Bear. And you had to step up and put it into a really tight window. Another ball, there were a couple. Carson Ryan, he got a little dinged up after one that I thought was a decent throw into a tight window. That's just a really tough play. And those are the kinds of plays that, like, if you're not going to make against Texas Tech, you're going to struggle to win. There was one when the game had started to get out of hand as well, where, I'm trying to remember, was it JoJo Phillips maybe that just got blasted after trying to catch the ball? And just stuff like that. If you're not going to be able to actually complete that, it's going to be tough to get enough offense to beat Texas Tech. It's also going to be tough if you miss a field goal. BYU had a missed field goal in this game, just like the first time around, that kept it from being a little bit more of a competitive game. I think that is something you could look back on, because at the time it would have been 13-10 in the third quarter, right? If you don't have the Will Ferrin missed field goal. So just, again, you talk about game pressure. How much game pressure can you put on Texas Tech? You start believing more if it's, hey, midway through the third quarter, it's 13-10, it's a 3-point game. Maybe that does change some things for you. I would also point out I'm so bad with the pronunciation of this name, but Satuala was really close to having a pick six. That was early, right? In the first quarter, ball kind of bounced off. I think it was Jacoby Williams kind of caught him in the shoulder pad and just barely kept Satuala away from having a pick six, which would have been a massive play early in the game. And like, that's the type of thing that you really needed if you were BYU and you wanted to have a legitimate chance to actually win this thing. You would have needed some huge play like that to go your way. Instead, it was really kind of the other thing. Also, I guess if we're talking about all things that could have flip-flopped and made this really competitive, there's the Terrence Carter fumble recovery. When Jacoby Williams at the end of the first half breaks off a sick run. I mean, it was an incredible run, but then ball gets punched free. And not only does Texas Tech recover, but it more or less hits Terrence Carter like in stride down the field so he can pick up an extra chunk of yards, like another 10 yards from it. That was when you kind of started to feel like, all right, man, this just doesn't feel like it's Texas Tech's day, or BYU's day, rather. Texas Tech's even getting the bounces here, in addition to just overwhelming with its defense. So it's a lot of my synopsis of the game. I know a lot of people now, this is going to turn to like bigger picture discussion here. What happens with the playoff? I fully understand that based on where everybody's head is at coming into today. I mean, ESPN immediately started turning the conversation with, I saw Heather Dinich right before I popped on here, who was on talking about Notre Dame, Miami, which will get very interesting because BYU, I'd assume, because I know you're not really supposed to get punished for losing your conference championship game. I'd assume since it was such a resounding defeat that the committee will feel obligated to move BYU down a spot or two. And then all of a sudden you're going to have Notre Dame and Miami right up next against each other. And at that point, can you ignore the head-to-head? I would sure hope Miami gets in that scenario. Look, man, I want to make the case for BYU, but today does make it tough. I mean, it does make it tough. We've said before, if you're going by resume, better strength of record, better strength of schedule, better best win for BYU as opposed to Notre Dame. Also had to come play a 13th game today, which is a second game against a top 5 team. But unfortunately, just neither game has been close. And the thing that's been holding BYU back is the eye test. And now there goes that eye test again, right? So the eye test is not going to tell anybody that watched today that had doubts about BYU that they are a playoff team. I think selection committee included. And I think that one category is just going to hold BYU back so much that's going to be the problem. Right or wrong, I am a guy that I would prefer to lean more toward let's reward teams for what they've done on the field. Let's reward them for what their resume actually is and says that they are. But I know what the reality is. So when I say like BYU's out, don't take this as like me trying to be, I'm not anti-BYU, I'll put it that way. Like I could definitely still make a case for BYU. And I sat through a press conference with Brett Yormark at the beginning of the day before the game kicked off where he made the case once again. He finally did come around to making a really strong case for BYU. I'll be interested to see how strong he's going to try to make that case in the next, less than 24 hours. The next 18 hours or so, if he tries to get out publicly and do much of that. He's trying, guys. He's spoken pretty strongly at each of his last 2 press conferences. He had one over Zoom earlier in the week and then one here today. He's trying, but it's a tough putt. I mean, the reality is most of the college football world watched 2 BYU football games this year. They were both against Texas Tech, and they both looked like that. I saw somebody threw out their 14 points in 8 quarters, right? I mean, both of the games that Texas Tech has played against BYU has scored 14 points in 8 quarters. So it's not going to be enough. It's not going to be enough to get BYU in the playoff, unfortunately, which that's a bummer, man. I mean, hey, like it's going to be the Pop-Tarts Bowl. I know Alamo theoretically would be, I guess, next up, but if you just played there last year, if it's going to be the Pop-Tarts Bowl or whatever, that does not feel like a scene worthy of what BYU's season has been or a scene that's befitting of what BYU's season has been. And that is unfortunate. And maybe if you're a BYU fan, now you become more of a proponent of a 2014 playoff, which is being pushed hard by the Big Ten. And Brett Yormark at a press conference today seemed to insinuate is something he's been talking about with other commissioners. He said, hey, I still like 5+11, but we've been talking about other formats, so stay tuned. I mean, that was more or less, I'm paraphrasing, his response there. So maybe that'll change. And if you are a BYU fan, this is the type of season where you would feel like, yeah, that would be made for us. If we could still have an opportunity to go to a playoff and play for something more meaningful than just a Pop-Tarts Bowl against whoever it might be. I get that. I get that there's going to be some pretty bitter disappointment there. But still, I mean, you know, a little bit of perspective on this BYU season, man. I will remind you that BYU lost its starting quarterback after spring ball, a starting quarterback who, by the way, just won a conference championship yesterday and had to play with a true freshman starting quarterback the entire season and still is sitting here at 11-2 after making a Big 12 championship game appearance. So 22-4 the last 2 years, nothing to scoff at. And you've got Kalani Sitake locked down long-term. You've now got a renewed commitment and an improved commitment to NIL for football based on the reporting from Pete Nakos of On3 that we saw around the Kalani Sitake situation. You are in a much, much better spot, my friends, right now than you were before. So don't let this drag you down too much, I guess would really be the point, is what I'm trying to get at. I know it'll sting today, and it should, and I understand that. The Texas Tech part of this, I don't think it's going to be a debate. You know, I saw that I didn't watch like College Game Day earlier today or anything like that. I was running around here. We had the Yormark press conference going on, right? But I know that I saw people saying there was discussion about, oh, Texas Tech's going to have to blow out BYU if they want to actually get a bye. Well, they definitely blew them out. Hopefully people were tuned in the fourth quarter when it just turned into Texas Tech overwhelming BYU. It would seem crazy for the committee to drop them out of the 4 spot after winning a game against a top 11 team by, 27 points at a neutral field. That would seem crazy, but ask TCU, ask Gary Patterson how that goes. He once beat a team by 52 points and then dropped from 3 to 6 in the playoff rankings right before the final rankings. So it has happened before, and it has happened before too, the Big 12. But you know, I don't think like Oregon is moving up without having played, certainly. I think the worry has to be if Alabama wins, like say Alabama wins by 3 touchdowns in the SEC championship game today. Well, then you feel like you probably have to move Georgia down, I guess, but are you going to then, if you knock them out of the top 4, do you leave the SEC champion out of the top 4 and the SEC gets no buys after Greg Sankey had a whole year campaign about this? Again, I'm not saying that's what I would care about. I'm saying I think the committee will probably be influenced by that and care about it, and the SEC gets so much love that it's hard to see the SEC champ being left out of having a first-round bye, right? So at that point, does Alabama like jump Texas Tech? Maybe you just flip-flop Georgia and Alabama. Maybe this isn't really much to worry about, but with what we typically see, the treatment that the SEC is typically going to get, I have some level of concern about some funny business based on whatever happens in the SEC championship game. Now, if Georgia wins, then it becomes pretty easy, right? Georgia will be there. Texas Tech is there. Bam, you got your 4. If Alabama beats Georgia, that's where I would wonder if anything funky could be up. I know I see the first comment down there, can't give multi-loss Bama a bye in that scenario. Listen, I get it. I would not want that. I would not advocate for that, but I'm just trying to operate in reality, right? The reality of the world that we are in. Unfortunately, that is a world that grants a lot more leniency to Alabama for losing to Florida State than it would anybody in the Big 12, right? In that scenario, I guess Texas Tech losing to Arizona State, right? Whatever it might be. I don't think it's going to happen. I think what Texas Tech did today was plenty enough to hold on to its spot at number 4. And now we just wait and see. That'll be what's interesting is what the rest of the draw looks like. You know, is it going to be then like Oregon, as of Oregon, James Madison, or Oregon, Virginia? You know, I guess we're looking at like Oregon, Virginia. I mean, there are so many scenarios that could play out in this playoff thing. I'm thinking through in my head. I'm like, all right, so then if Virginia wins tonight, the ACC could go from disaster scenario looked like might happen if Duke wins and Miami gets left out to, is it still on the table then that Virginia wins, gets in with an auto bid, and then Miami jumps Notre Dame, and suddenly the ACC, so suddenly the ACC then has 2 teams in after thinking it was going to be doomsday with nobody. That's a crazy scenario that could come up, especially as you're comparing the 2 conferences. It felt like the Big 12 was in a much better position, and I would still feel better about the Big 12's position to get the furthest in the playoff with Texas Tech having a first-round bye. And those other 2 teams not in that scenario, they could both easily lose in the first round. But I know some people do care. Are you multi-bid league, single bid league, whatever? That could be a bit of a hit to the Big 12's ego if that were to happen. But I just think a lot of it's going to be contingent on what happens. It is actually really interesting. We have a 1v2 game, Indiana, Ohio State, and I really, it seems like the least consequential game for sure. Of the conference championship games that we have today. I'll be very interested what happens in the SEC, which I know is going on right now. I have not looked at that at all. I'll be very interested in what happens in the SEC. I will be very interested in what's going to happen in the ACC. Should be crazy. So with that, guys, I'm going to get to the super chats in just a moment. If you have anything else, you got just a couple minutes left to get it in for me here at AT&T Stadium. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, all that stuff really helps. I appreciate everybody who does that immensely. Subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter at ofbnews.com. That's ofbnews.com to get subscribed to that. So I appreciate everybody who does that. And let's see for now. Let me pop in on the super chats. Hot Lamberson, great name. Hot Lamberson. Based off this game, what would you say Tech needs to improve most other than, basically like the red zone offense? I mean, I think that's just like far and away number one. To me, the concerns with Texas Tech are red zone offense and then just overall quarterback health, keeping Baron Morton healthy. But, today, I felt like Baron Morton played a pretty good game. I didn't see him. I was trying to pay attention. I didn't see him moving as gingerly, and it probably helps that the last 2 games he played, he got the second half off. He seemed pretty locked in today. I felt better about seeing the way Texas Tech looked today, about their opportunity to win playoff games based on that. But I think that's just such a big glaring thing. I mean, 6 field goals today. I know BYU's got a pretty good defense, but you have to find better red zone offense, better ways to score. And I know it's difficult because quarterback run game can be a huge help there in the red zone, and you don't have that with Baron Morton, but need to be more consistent moving the ball. I know Joey McGuire said in his halftime interview, we probably need to run the ball a little bit more. I think that's something that, you'll just want to be more consistent running the ball. It felt like they ran it pretty well today, but then I looked down and it's 3.9 yards per carry, 159 yards. It's okay. That's okay. But it'd be nice to see the running game pop a bit more chunk plays. Especially in the red zone, could be very helpful for the Texas Tech offense. Morton was 20 of 33 for 215 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks today. So pretty good. Pretty good. That's really it. I don't what can you say about the defense? I've got nothing for the defense. Were there 2 missed field goals today? So I guess special teams, make sure that you're hitting the field goals, but it's going to come down to you got to be able to punch the ball in more often, because if you do that, what happened today, you're going to run into a game in the playoff where instead of being up 13-7, you might be down 20-13, something like that. As good as this Tech defense is, you run into a better offense, you could then be in a hole as opposed to still being out in front. And you're probably not going to get as many gift-wrapped turnovers toward the end of the game as you got today from BYU. So that's really what I would say, Hot Lamberson. Maybe there's an answer that I'm missing that's a little bit more obvious, but I think that's the one Achilles heel of this Texas Tech team right now. Michael, what's up, Michael? Can BYU please get a night game at home against Texas Tech? Yeah, I did hear Kalani Sitake say during his postgame press conference today, trying to remember how he phrased it. He was like, look, it was when he was calling Tech the number 1 team in the country. He was like, look, we played the number 1 team in the country twice. Once was on the road. The second was a neutral site game that was in their home state. So what do you want? And it's hard to argue too much with him on that. Yeah, okay, fair. Fair, dude. That is totally fair. I'm sure I'm sure the committee will take that into strong consideration. Unfortunately, they will not when it comes to a playoff spot. Darius, please describe the atmosphere. Man, it was great. So I was here 3 years ago for K-State TCU, which was also, I'd have to go look and see if they considered it a sellout. I mean, it was really packed and really loud, but I think it was louder today, different atmosphere than that one, because today it was so much. I mean, it was really like 80-20 Texas Tech fans. And so it was much more one-sided. And then the game played out in a much more one-sided way instead of this epic back and forth. So like K-State TCU was much more kind of like NCAA tournament game, if you've ever been to one of those, where it's like, two sides of the arena kind of going back and forth. This was more just like Tech fans were very loud, very loud. I was walking around on the field before the game, and when I was, when Tech like ran out, I was just like, whoa, because when you're actually down there on the field, like it's a little more intense in terms of the actual, like how loud that hits you. I spent a lot of time early in my career. I spent years shooting video from the sideline, and when I was doing that, man, it was like you just get a totally different sense for how loud something is. And it took me back to that a little bit. When Tech came out, I was like, damn, there are a lot of Tech fans here. And I thought one of the cooler moments I've seen, it was, I kind of took a deep breath and was like, I love college football, man, was when Joey McGuire at the end of the game was at the podium. And I don't remember what the first question was, but he gets asked the first question and he just was like, wait, no, hold on. And he does Raider power 3 times back and forth. And that first power from the crowd that obviously like everybody had stuck around, that was pretty loud. And that was very cool. It's a really, really cool college football moment. I am genuinely so thrilled for my Texas Tech fan friends that they got to experience that. That is awesome. So yeah, that's what I would say. I mean, kudos to the BYU fans that were here. They were definitely loud too, as loud as they could be with the opportunities that they had, but the game flow and just the geography of this, I think made it such a pro Texas Tech crowd that this was like Texas Tech's moment from the word go. But I will tell you this too. I talked to another media member who comes regularly to Cowboys games and told me like, oh, this atmosphere is just worlds better than virtually every single Cowboys game that I've ever seen and covered here. So if that makes you feel better as a Texas Tech fan, it was definitely, which, look, it's college football versus the NFL. We should all expect that. This is why college football is miles better than the NFL, because of the atmospheres and environments and crowds and all of that. But just further proof of that from somebody who regularly covers Cowboys games here at AT&T Stadium. So that would be my report on the atmosphere, Darius. It was awesome. It's definitely awesome. Pacific Northwest Ute, quote, you didn't believe our 29-7 score on November 8th? We'll see you and raise you 5 for the title, 34-7. Love Red Raider Nation. Hashtag Utah by 5. Okay, Pacific Northwest Ute. Is that Utah by 5 in a rematch against BYU, or Utah by 5 in a rematch against Texas Tech? Because, maybe if you play a game against BYU and Rice Eccles, maybe I could get behind that. Maybe. I don't know about Texas Tech, man. Tech's a wagon. Texas Tech is a wagon. They have proven it all year long, and they proved it once again here today. But I appreciate you chiming in, as always, Pacific Northwest Ute. Thank you very much, my friend. Key for 3 at PG. Oh, I like that. Key for 3 at PG. You could say, oh, man. Oh, boy. You could say BYU's college football playoff plans have crumbled. Damn. That's hard, man. That's hard. That's a pretty good bar. I got to give that for you, Key for 3 at PG. I'm sorry, BYU fans. There were crumble ads on little billboards in the end zone today. So is it Jason McGowan? Is that his name? Jason McGowan was doing work and getting his stamp of approval put on everything in the end zone. So good for him. Little memento to the week that was in college football, man. This caps off just a crazy week. I haven't said a word about Matt Campbell here on this show yet. I did the video when we kind of knew the offer was on the table for him. He's gone to Penn State. I'll react to that much more on the live show tomorrow. I wanted to try and give you a video like last night, but it was like by the time I got in and then we were doing a 3-mock because we're still reacting to Colin Klein. It's just been too much this week, guys. There's been too much, man. Kalani Sitake almost went to Penn State. Matt Campbell did go to Penn State. Chris Kleiman suddenly retired. K-State hired Colin Klein. Iowa State already hired Jimmy Rogers from Washington State, and then we've had the playoff ranking debate all throughout this week. Joey McGuire signed an extension too, by the way. Congrats to Joey. He's a really good dude. I'll take this off the screen for you, BYU fans. I'm sorry. There's just been too much going on. I'm stoked to see what Texas Tech's draw is going to be in the playoff. I just, BYU fans, I don't even know what to tell you really about the next 20 hours or so until the playoff rankings come out, because I don't know that there's much hope or that it's going to be very interesting, other than if you want to root against Notre Dame and hope that Miami gets in, if that makes you feel any better, I suppose that's on the table. But that's what I got. That's what I got for you here from AT&T Stadium. So thank you, everybody. Much appreciate everybody for hanging out here in the chat here today. Thank you to AT&T Stadium for being a great host. Thank you to everybody at the Big 12. Matt Enzer doing a great job keeping everything going, leading the comms effort today. Had a great time here. I'm going to catch a late night plane back home to Kansas City, and I will see you all tomorrow. So, like the video, subscribe to the channel, spread the word, tell your friends, subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter at ofbnews.com. That's ofbnews.com. And follow me on Twitter if you want more updates at JL Kurtz. All right, guys, take care. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Enjoy the final remnants of a somewhat normal college football Saturday, and I will talk to you all soon.